Hello my friends, welcome back for another Raggedy Rescue. This is Jennifer and today we're going to be working on some clothes for this little Raggedy Andy. This is my guy who we cleaned up very thoroughly last time. You can still see he has a tiny bit of yellowing, but if you remember him from before, he's so much cleaner. So today he's going to be getting this little jumpsuit here, and I'm going to be making this to coordinate with the Raggedy Ann you saw in my last Raggedy Rescue video. In case you need a reminder, this is what she looks like here. So his outfit will coordinate with hers, and then they will be a Raggedy Ann and Andy set. We will be using the same pattern as before. This is 8377. And I did make sure before I ever started working on this guy that this is the pattern he was made from. This pattern, I've mentioned before, was my grandmother's pattern, and I'm delighted that I get to continue to use it for these Raggedy Rescues. A couple of quick notes before I start. I included information about how I mark my fabric in the last Raggedy Rescue, and I will put a link to that in the description. Also, all of the supplies that I use today, plus all of the supplies I've used for all of my Raggedy Rescues, are on my website, sewhookedjen.com. And they have their own special page for that, and I will put a link for that in the description as well. I'll also include whatever I happen to use in today's video. First up, we're going to be making his shirt. And another quick note, because I said it repeatedly last time and you guys only need to hear it once, is I do use a serger when I'm making these clothes, but the pattern doesn't call for a serger. You don't need a serger, so don't feel like you can't do this if you don't have one. These are the shirt pieces for Andy's little outfit. So we have 12, 13, 14, and 15, and this is going to be shirt front, shirt back, sleeve, and his little collar. So first up, I'm going to mark these and get them ready to go. All of our pieces are marked, and as you can see, I'm using a little contrasting collar here. Hey guys, it's me from the future jumping in to tell you that I made a mistake on this pattern. I managed to turn the two back pieces of the shirt sideways. I did not realize until I was editing, and I just wanted to give you guys a heads up because I didn't want you to think that you were seeing something weird. I saw it as soon as I started editing, and I can't believe I missed it while I was working on it. So there you go. There's your little disclaimer. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. So the first thing we're going to do is stitch these shoulder seams. Our shirt is stitched together at the shoulder seams, and now I'm going to put a narrow hem on the edges of both of these sleeves. Our sleeves are hemmed. Now it's time to stitch them to the shoulders of the shirt. We want to match our center dot to our shoulder seam, and then we'll match our little notches. So when you're looking at these, just try to match the diagram. You want this notch to go here and this notch to go here. Sleeves can be a little tricky because of the curve, but I find that if you sew with the flatter part down, so in this case I'm going to have the shirt underneath, I will be working on the top. I'll be stitching from the top, and I'll just go a little at a time and ease these pieces in. So you can see this is sewn in place. Now let's sew on the other sleeve. Our sleeves are sewn to the body of our shirt, and now we're going to move on to our collar. So we'll pin this together, right sides facing, and then 1/4 inch seam all the way around, leaving the neck open. So I have this outer edge stitched together. Again, it was across the top and then around the outside of the collar. And I wanted to show you on this piece, I always put a little dot at the top where I'm supposed to turn, and then we're going to slit this up here, so that when we turn it, we get nice points. We're going to slit this and then cut off these little corners here. And then we will cut along our curved seam so it'll turn and sit nice and flat after we press it. So I have this all pressed, and I usually have a side that's a little bit prettier. So this will be my front, and the side that's got a little bit of a pinch, I'm going to put that on the back. So our next step is going to be to sew the collar to the shirt. We start out by only sewing the inside. So we're going to open it up and we're going to baste around the shirt, keeping in mind that the opening is at the back. So we'll match our centers, our shoulders, and our notches, and then we will baste before we move on to our next step. So I've got my collar pinned in place. It looks a little bit crazy, but it's not actually very difficult. You're just going to start at one end and then slowly baste around this curve. I will be pulling the pins out before I stitch. I don't stitch over my pins. So I like to kind of, when I'm basting the collar on, I put the pins this way because it kind of helps keep the part I don't want to sew pulled away from my stitching line. So we've got our little collar basted in place, and I'm just going to check and make sure I didn't get any little pleats or little pinches anywhere, and I did not. My seam allowance turned over a little bit, but I'm not super fussed about that, so we won't worry about that. And now I'm just going to stitch it as it was basted. And you can see here that I started at the seam line and I finished on the other side at the same seam line at the end of the collar. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to stitch it just like I basted it. My collar is stitched in place. Now I'm going to clip the seam just on the inside right here. We'll get this curve clipped. I'm also going to clip right at the seam line so that I can press that seam allowance to the inside. So I'm going to press all of that to the inside of the collar. Here we are with the seam allowance pressed inside the collar, and you can see it's actually a lot easier to do it from the back because you can really see this seam line. So I'm going to turn this in and I'm going to press it down, making sure all the little bits and pieces are on the inside of the collar. And then we will do a slip stitch all the way around just to hold everything together. So let's press it first. Here we are with the seam allowance for the collar pressed inside. And now I'm going to slip stitch right across the little opening right there. I find that clips work better than pins for this particular step, so that tends to be what I use. And I'm just using an Aurifil. This is, I buy white by the cone, so this is just one of my bobbins that I pre-wound for this project. I'm not sure if you can tell in the video, but I am trying to keep the back just a little bit lower than the front so that it doesn't show up from the outside. There we are, all stitched into place. And if you don't want to hand stitch this, guys, by all means, just do a little edge stitch using your sewing machine. I've done it before, it looks just fine. And if you expect to get a lot of wear and tear out of these, that can even be better. Next up, we're going to sew the seams on our sleeves. And now we move on to our little pants. The first thing I'm going to do with these is the same thing I did before. I'm just going to mark where I need my buttons and my center lines wherever those need to be. So first up on our pants, we're going to sew our center front seam. So we're going to want those right sides together. And we can tell the front and back because the back has this little extra notch where the opening of the back of the little pantsuit will be. So stitch the seam and I went ahead and clipped my curves. The next instruction is a 1/4 inch hem on both bottoms. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And just like last time when I was working on Raggedy Ann's clothes, I'm going to serge across and then stitch up. Our legs are hemmed. So next we're going to stitch from our circle, which I've marked with this yellow line, down here. This is the center back. We will not be sewing this bit because that is going to be our opening to put the doll into his outfit. Our stitching line's in place, and I have clipped the left back to the circle so that this one will lay flat. Now we're going to stitch our legs, and then we'll be ready to put our pants and our top together. Our little pants are actually pants now. I've got our inside seam line here. We still have our little opening. So I made a mistake earlier in this process, and instead of pretending it didn't happen and fixing it off camera, I decided to just show you how I'm going to fix it. So earlier I cut where I should have folded and ended up cutting off my little flap here. So instead of redoing all of this, because the collar's already in place, the sleeves are already on, I added a little piece of fabric here, as you can see, just to make it match what it should have been originally. And this will end up being on the inside, so it won't really matter, but I just wanted to be honest with you guys and show you that I made a mistake. So we have our pants and we have our top. Now I'm going to pin these together, matching our openings in the back, our centers, and the marks on the sides. We're all pinned together, so let's sew. I've stitched and I've serged, and now it's time to turn everything right side out. Guys, that is going to be so cute. So cute. So now that we have it turned right side out, we're going to, first we'll press the seam toward the shirt, so it's already kind of laying that way naturally. And then we're going to turn under our left back shirt edge and pants edge. And then we'll turn our right to the inside as well. And the right's going to go on top of the left when we put the snaps in. So let me go ahead and press that, and then I'll go ahead and do our stitching line here, and then we'll move on to buttons and snaps. Before I stitch, I want to show you guys this. The instructions are not super clear about what you're doing here, so I turn the rest of this top under and then put the seam line on top of that, and I will turn this under again before I stitch it down, but just to have a nice finished edge at the very back of the neck. So our back opening is ready to go. The right side will go over the left side, and everywhere I've put a pin, I will have a snap. I do put more snaps on Andy's outfit because he does not have an apron. I will be using the same little sew-on snaps, but you can use really whatever you want. And I do want the outie, for want of a better expression, to go on the left side so that you're pushing against that from the top. Here we go. We have all of our snaps in place, and I did match my thread color so that these would blend in a little bit better. So we got our snaps in place. The very last thing we have to do is to add Andy's buttons. He has little decorative buttons that go at the waist and on the side of his little pants here. So I'm going to get those sewn on, and then we'll be ready to dress him. And here we are, buttons sewn on the waistband, buttons sewn on the legs, and of course you already saw the snaps, so how about we put this little outfit on? So this goes a long way towards making him look like a whole new guy. All he needs now is his little sailor hat, and he will be ready to hang out with his sister. His hat is going to be made from piece 17 and 18 from McCall's 8377. Once again, this is a retired pattern. So let's sew this dart, and then we'll move on to the next step. I find the easiest way to make my dart is to find my two outside edges with a pin. I usually use a couple. Mark my point, fold the whole thing, I don't know if you guys can see the line or not, but I can see the line through here. I should have marked the other side, but I'm not going to go back and do it. So I'm just going to mark it with pins, and then I will pull them out as I stitch. Here we have our dart. Now I just need to sew our brim together. So I have stitched the ends of our brim together. And the end with the notches is the end we're going to sew the notched side to. I'll be using clips again for this because I just find that easier. So we're going to match our notch. And then we're going to match our notch. And where this crease is the center here. We're going to match the dart to that, which is easy peasy. It wants to match all by itself. I'm going to come around here. Same thing on this side. I have a crease where my center is. Match that up. Go ahead and give that a little bit of clip for stability. Same thing here. So we're all clipped together, and I do find it easier to sew from this side. So the crown will lay flat, and then I will start here and I will work my way around, and then I'll pivot, and then I'll work my way around. So here we go, we're all stitched on. It's kind of hard to tell, but I did press the seam of the crown towards the brim, which is the darker fabric. And I've turned up 1/2 inch on the edge here. We're going to fold our brim up. And we want it to come up to the stitching. And then we're going to actually slip stitch this in place. So I'm going to pin this, and then we'll stitch it in place. So I've got my brim pinned to the underside of the crown. I'm going to slip stitch this all the way around, and then we'll be done. Our inside seam is stitched in place. I've pressed this up, leaving about 1/2 inch here so that we have our nice little sailor hat. The trick to the little sailor hats is you actually stitch them on. So you put the hat where you want it, you figure out how you like it, and then you tack it to two sides. So options are straight across the head, jaunty angle this side, jaunty angle this side, and then you just tack it right on the ends. You can certainly not tack this hat on if you choose. I will tell you this, that every Raggedy Andy that I have done a rescue for that didn't have his hat attached didn't have a hat when I got him, and I'm assuming it's just because it got lost. So I have been tacking them on the last few times. I make it really easy to remove that stitching if you don't want to have it. So yeah, I think it's a nice little touch. And here we go, all tacked on. As you can see, it's just 2 stitches on each side, super easy to take out if you don't want it, and it keeps his hat attached. So my friends, that's going to be it for this Raggedy Rescue. I really hope you've enjoyed this series of the 2 dolls that I've been working on. I am so pleased to have siblings. Stay tuned for the end of the video. I will have them both together and you'll get some nice close-ups of them. This guy came from Austin Creative Reuse, and I'm going to end by sharing his before and after, and then a little video of him with his brand new sister. You guys have a really wonderful week. Have a crafty week. Be sure and stop by every Tuesday for Talk to Me Tuesday, and I'll be back soon with another Raggedy Rescue. Bye.